Welcome to the recorded version of the Grantmakers in Aging web seminar, How Do I Know What's Right for My Community? Evidence of Effective and Replicable Age-Friendly Interventions, featuring Jeanne Anthony, Senior Program Manager of AARP Livable Communities, Judy Willett, National Director of the Village to Village Network, Derenda Schubert, Executive Director of Bridge Meadows Intergenerational Community, and John Feather, CEO of Grantmakers in Aging, from July 22, 2014. This event was made possible by a partnership between Grantmakers in Aging, the John A. Hartford Foundation, the New York Academy of Medicine, Community Agenda, and the Pfizer Foundation. Technical and production support is provided by the American Society on Aging.
Thanks so much, Steve, and welcome to everyone today. As Steve mentioned, our topic today is on looking at the evidence around what's an effective and replicable age-friendly interventions. This is an area that's grown exponentially both here in the United States and around the world, and we're very pleased to bring you this session today. Before we begin, I want to thank those whose support has made today's webinar available free of charge to our audience. The John A. Hartford Foundation of New York provides continuing support for the series, the New York Academy of Medicine, the Community Agenda Initiative, and the Pfizer Foundation. We also want to thank the expert team at the American Society on Aging for providing technical and production support for the series. As we've mentioned, the concept of age-friendly communities and cities has been adapted and applied worldwide. So how do we know, now that we've had some experience with these, which of these efforts at age-friendly programs are effective? How do you know what will work best in your own community? What are some of the ideas for replicable programs that you might try in your particular city or town or region? Our speakers today have been deeply engaged in this process and will help us understand the opportunities and challenges that this presents. So joining me today are Jeanne Anthony, who's Senior Project Manager for Education and Outreach at AARP's Livable Communities, Judy Willett, who is the National Director of the Village to Village Network, and Derenda Schubert, who is the Executive Director of the Bridge Meadows Intergenerational Community in Portland, Oregon. We welcome you all. So Jeanne, let's start with you. AARP is the largest organization focused on those above the age of 50 in the United States. In fact, it's actually the largest membership organization in the world. So tell us what the AARP Livable Communities is all about and why AARP felt this approach was so critical.
Well, John, thank you very much for that question and for the opportunity to present on the webinar today. AARP focuses on livable communities issue areas, and we really think about that in a broad fashion that includes housing, transportation, and sort of everything in between in terms of the community itself. And the reason that we do that is because our members tell us regularly that as they get older, they want to be able to stay in their homes and their communities. And we know that many of the communities in our country are not prepared to provide the services and to support a population that's getting older. And so what we try to do in our work is provide the tools and the resources and the local support to help communities begin to undertake some of the necessary changes that will allow for their residents to be more comfortable as they get older. And we believe that in the work that we do, not only do the older population benefit, but all of the residents in the community will receive the benefits. And so there are two key strategies that we really focus our work around. And if you'll move to the next slide, what we do is we seek to provide resources for public officials and help them begin to enact the changes that we think are necessary to support an older population within the community. And then we also seek to empower the residents, 50-plus and all residents, to champion change within their own communities and in their own homes. And on the next slide, you'll see that one of the programs that we deliver for communities is the AARP network of age-friendly communities. And this is work that's done through two fairly significant organizational entities within AARP. One is our state staff, and we have staff located in all 50 states, as well as the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, and they work with many key stakeholders in communities in their own states. And then we also have a significant cadre of very engaged volunteers who not only serve as advocates, but also project leads on many of the projects that we undertake, and Age-Friendly Communities is just one of them. So as a program that we deliver, our staff and volunteers engage in the communities to help them determine if they are ready and can support an effort to enroll in the network. And once that decision is taken, AARP guides the community through the process of not only enrolling, but also in moving through an assessment to building an action plan, as well as ultimately through the implementation of the plan and the evaluation. And on the next slide, you'll see how the work is really outlined. These are the 8 domains of livability that have been developed by the World Health Organization. And the World Health Organization has the global network of age-friendly communities. AARP's network is an institutional affiliate. We launched in April of 2012, and we've now grown to 30 communities throughout the state and are anticipating continued growth in that. And for today's webinar, I thought it would be helpful, well, let me just go back a little bit. You can see that these 8 domains, we've really subdivided into 2 key areas and then a cross-cutting one. So the outdoor spaces and buildings, transportation, and housing we refer to as the built environment. The social participation, respect and social inclusion, civic participation, and employment we refer to as the social environment. And these are obviously key aspects of an individual's ability to live comfortably in their community and also be part of and contribute to the community itself. The other 2, the community support and health services and communication information, we believe are cross-cutting and are also critical. So much of the work is grounded in one or many of those 8 domains. And so as I mentioned, I think we'll focus on 2 of our communities as a little bit of a case study for today's webinar. On the next slide, we'll start with Brownsville, Texas. Brownsville is in Texas. Our AARP state director has determined that the age-friendly framework is a great overarching structure for all of the work that we do. And so we currently have 3 communities that are enrolled in age-friendly with the idea that there will be more joining. Brownsville itself joined last year. They are a small community on the border between Mexico and also happens to be the home of our state president, which is a volunteer role that we have. One of the issues in Brownsville, if you'll move to the next slide, is that there are significant levels of health issues. The obesity rate there is quite high, both in the older and the younger population, and it's actually one of the poorest cities in America. So when we look at what can be done to help make change in that area, one of the techniques that we used was to deliver technical assistance through the form of a workshop. And fortunately, on the next slide, you can see that Brownsville has just a beautiful downtown, which has fallen into some disrepair, but there is a lot of work and energy towards that work that is being put into improving the built environment there. So we brought some technical assistance to Brownsville, and on the next several slides, we'll show you just some of the recommendations that we made. But I don't want to overlook the fact that the officials in Brownsville, particularly one of the city commissioners, is very much engaged and really serves as a catalyst for much of the age-friendly work, because not only is she a commissioner, but she is a medical doctor, and saw some of the impact of a failed built environment, lack of healthy foods, lack of opportunities for physical activity. And so as we moved into Brownsville, we looked at the downtown area and saw that there was opportunity to reverse some of the traffic patterns that were in place and to begin to think about how we could restore the community itself and make it a more walkable downtown area, which would then contribute to some economic development that's quite needed in that area. The downtown of Brownsville is adjacent to the border crossing, so there is a heavy amount of foot traffic. So by improving the walkability and bringing in more stores and other types of facilities and services, then not only would the community residents benefit, but also the folks that are coming over from Mexico and visiting in Brownsville. On the next slide, you'll see one of the other recommendations that we made in terms of really beginning to solidify not only some of the built environment, but the connection between the university in Brownsville and the town itself. So here you see an alley that could be transformed and would serve as a direct connection to downtown and the historic plaza, as well as the University of Texas Brownsville campus. And so on the next slide, you'll see what our vision and what we recommended the alley could be turned into, a very viable walking area with coffee shops and, other kinds of businesses, small markets, restaurants, and things of that nature. And so Brownsville is using the age-friendly framework, as well as some of the technical advice that we had provided through the workshop to begin to really reimagine what their entire built environment can be, and by doing that to really change the fabric of the social environment as well. So if we can move on to the next slide. So this is basically some of the folks in Brownsville helping us understand what they believe would be necessary to improve Brownsville. This was a listening post that was set up. And so they really are beginning to undertake quite a bit of work, including the development of their action plan. And then in the next case study, we'll move on to Macon, Georgia. They too were have become an age-friendly community, and they're a little bit further along than Brownsville in that they have completed their action plan and are actually in the implementation phase. But as we kicked off some of that work, we also brought to Macon some technical advice and expertise that was then translated into the development of the action plan. But one of the interesting things about Macon, which I think is a great takeaway, is that Macon is the county seat for Bibb County, and these were two separate jurisdictions that the mayor of Macon and his counterpart, the county executive in Bibb County, recognized that if they were to continue to provide the necessary services to their constituents, they could not do it as separate jurisdictions. And so the two of them worked collaboratively to bring a referendum to their constituents, as well as to enroll both the county and the city in the age-friendly network. And the end result is that these two jurisdictions have merged, and as a result of that, the ability for them to provide services to all of the county and city residents has improved. And in Macon, we can move on to the next slide. We have, that's a picture of the mayor and the county executive and Myrtle Habersham, who is a key volunteer for AARP in Macon. And she really is leading a lot of the work that's going on in Macon. And if you want to move to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about some of the structure that has been put in place there. They have committees that have organized around each of the 8 domains, as well as an advisory committee that was established by the mayor of Macon. And what has been done is they've identified several 100-day challenges, which are small projects that can be identified, resourced, and completed within about 100 days. And the purpose for this tactic within the context of age-friendly or any type of improving the livability of a community is to look at projects that can be completed as a way of identifying key folks who can participate in the work that's being done, serve as a motivating factor because they're meeting milestones and things are getting done, and they become a very tangible symbol to residents within the community. And then it also serves to indicate that resources are being well used and that additional resources should be allocated to other projects within the context of the work that they are doing. And so if we move to the next slide, one of the areas that we focused on was a park that's called Tatnall Square Park. And what we realized in looking at the park was that it was not very accessible and it wasn't being used in the manner that it could. And so through some recommendations and some advice that was provided, the Friends of Tatnall Square Park were able to get a grant and are undertaking a lot of the work to make it more accessible and to make it truly a great outdoor space for all of the residents of the community. In addition to that, on the next slide, you'll just see an example of some of the work that will be done to the streets that surround the park to improve not only the traffic flow and to calm the traffic some, but also to be able to improve the access to the park for residents. It happens to be across the street from a senior center as well as Mercer University, and further through across the street on another side from some affordable housing that's been renovated and redeveloped. So it's really important that this park have the various facilities that are attractive to all different kinds of ages and abilities in that area because of the types of constituencies that surround it. As well, it serves as a connector to other parts of the community. And so on the next slide, you'll see just a little bit about the structure that was put in place. I'm sorry, just go ahead and skip through that one. That's just another, this process evaluation where a subcommittee was created to oversee the work that was being done in AgeFriendly. And as I mentioned, there is a separate subgroup that's working on each one of the domains that has an agenda with tactics outlined, and then they report back to the subcommittee. And periodically there is an opportunity for the public to be able to weigh in on what's being accomplished, and also for the community to determine if some of the awareness is building and people are being able to take advantage of some of the changes that are being made as part of the process. And the next slide is just a page from the Macon BIB action plan that just shows how they identified the domain, who was responsible, what the goals were, the measures, and when it was anticipated that the project would start and the project would be completed. So it's a very good working document against which they can measure their efforts and be able to report back on it. And then on the last side, this is just a link to our website. We provide a lot of resources for communities and for elected officials as well as community activists at aarp.org/livable. And it has my contact information should anyone like to reach out. We'd love for you to sign up for our newsletter and take advantage of the resources that we make available.
Well, thanks so much, Jeanne. That's a very useful presentation, both in terms of the general work, but also some specific examples. Before we move on to the next speaker, I want to remind you of a couple things. One is that if you would like copies of the slides from today's presentation, just send an email to info@asaging.org. So asaging.org. info@asaging.org. We will also be recording, we are recording this session, and it will be available on the Grantmakers in Aging website within a couple of weeks. Finally, you can go ahead and start typing in your questions. There's a question box on the right hand of your screen, and so you feel free to go ahead and add those. So, Judy, at this point, let's turn to you and talk about one of the fastest growing movements in the age-friendly world in this country, and that's the Village movement. So what can you tell us about that?
Thank you, John. This is Judy Willett, and I am delighted to be to be here today and to be part of this exciting and pioneering approach, which is what baby boomers and people of all ages want to do, which is stay in their homes. What I'll do for changing the slides is just say next. So next. What I want to start with is a real understanding of where the village movement came from, definitions of the village movement, because people might think, oh, isn't that just like a NORC, or isn't it an age-friendly community, or et cetera, et cetera. The village movement complements all those. You can actually have a village in your community, in your neighborhood, in a larger geographic area, and you can also have a NORC building. Hopefully you will also have an age-friendly community designation, etc. So I just wanted to start with the idea that these are all options. They complement each other, and even the options of continuing care retirement communities. As you'll hear as we talk more, these are ways for people to age in community, but it's critical that as we all grow older, as we always have had, we have options. So in 2000, there was a group of people in Boston, and they were very passionate about staying in their own home. They talked to specific friends. They worked with Harvard alumni. They researched the country, and they realized that they were developing a new idea, a new paradigm shift, and they started to raise funds. Next, they looked at what exactly would make up the village. And that was a grassroots membership organization, self-governing, that was based on volunteers, neighbors helping neighbors, that was a consolidator and a coordinator of services that people needed, but also that people wanted. Never duplicating anything that already existed, and really a good concierge and referral source. The next slide will show that staying in your own home and in the community that you love is all of what the village is and village movement is about. They are all nonprofits currently. They're membership organizations created by older people for older people. They're one-stop shopping, so you can call the office, and that's either run by staff or volunteers, and really truly get everything that you want and need and be part of a community that is growing. Members are the driving force. That's one real difference. It is not a social service agency. It truly is a nonprofit that is a village that creates a community for people. And on the next slide, you'll see that there are three different components of a village, which is concierge, and that is access to vetted, discounted providers in your community for everything and anything that people want and need, or volunteers who will offer those services. And that is services, everything from massage therapists to personal trainers to meals delivered to discounts to electricians, plumbers, volunteers driving, and more. Assistance in living is very much what people might think of when you think of a village or you think of services, and that is helping people who either break their leg skiing or need a hip replacement, so you have a short-term need, or a long-term chronic illness. And in that case, volunteers can help, or vetted discounted providers to home care, geriatric care managers, meals delivered, grocery shopping, transportation, and then the third, which makes this truly a completely comprehensive approach and shift is programs and seminars and trips, any way that the villagers themselves and members themselves and the community choose to build ways for friends, neighbors, and members of the village to really be together and counter the isolation that sometimes happens as we live in our homes as we grow older. Villages are consumer-driven no matter how they're funded. In the next slide, you'll see the highest ratings from volunteers of recreation and fitness activities. Some volunteers included in their membership fee offer exercise classes, trips, transportation home from doctor-prescribed rides, doctor-prescribed procedures, all the way to home maintenance and repair, personal care through vetted discounted providers. And even Capitol Hill Village, which is in Washington, D.C., they offer volunteers who they call kind of super volunteers, and those people actually are trained, and they help do more care coordination and help people who are in transition and changing either from the hospital to home, changing from retirement to staying at home and looking for different jobs, just a whole variety of things. Think of the village as kind of what color is your parachute. We all read that at some point probably. And what do you want to do with your life? How do you provide meaning? By being a member of a volunteer and being a volunteer for a village. So looking more at the next slide, you'll start to see that villages themselves are nonprofit businesses. And I put this in because for this webinar especially, we're all looking at, is this effective? Can I do this in my community? How villages are funded at this point is member fees cover 45 to probably 60%, 70% of the expenses of the village. And then fundraising is the rest of it. And some have low, moderate income, subsidized memberships, and therefore foundations and even community donations help with that. The average budget for a village is around $100,000. So there are villages that charge $25 a year all the way up to $1,000 a year as the price point, including many different things in the membership fee itself. And looking at the next question is, why is a village model right now? We can look very clearly at the next slide, which is the age wave opportunities. Because there are more people, as we all know, 65 and older than any time in history, it is very important that people themselves are creating these options. You can see the numbers. The second reason on the next slide is because we're craving community, companionship, and meaning in our lives. Also, on the next slide, you'll be able to see that building senior communities and retirement facilities, even if that's what we all wanted, it would take way too long and cost too much. On the next slide, you'll see that 90% of older people, when asked, want to stay in our own homes and in our own communities. The other thing is that most of us do not want to be a burden on our adult children, and villages give us that independence and connectedness that you can see in the next slide that enables all of us to stay in our own homes. The villages have created the village-to-village network, and that enables communities and individuals to establish and effectively manage and initiate your own villages. So if you and your community deem that you want to explore the idea of starting a village, come on to the village-to-village network. You'll see the website in a minute, and you'll be able to see, as in the next slide, you'll be able to see that there are villages popping up all over the country and actually in other countries also. Currently, on the next slide, you'll see that there are 145 open villages representing 25,000 members, and 125 groups are also developing villages in 39 states and 3 other countries. We, the Village-to-Village Network, and many other villages like Beacon Hill Village and more have consulted to over 40 other countries because it's a common sense idea of way that we can all age in our community and really bring meaning and volunteerism into a way that helps all of us. Currently, there are 200, actually this is a little old, there are 225 Village-to-Village Network members. And you can see on the next slide, through the spreading the word of PR and all of the major U.S. News and World Report, CBS News, the AARP magazine, Kiplinger's Retirement Post, etc. This is a model that a lot of people, 50 and over and of all ages, are interested because cities, towns, and states are interested in looking at what is the impact of the baby boomers coming online to their community and how can they support a new innovation like the villages in their communities. You can skip to not the next slide, which just highlights some of the network benefits, but to the slide after that, which talks about the quality of life impacts. And we finally, although it's a new movement, up until, Village to Village, Beacon Hill Village was started in 2002. The next villages, 5 to 8 of them, were started in about 2005, 6, and 7. And all of the 140 other villages have really come online in the past 4 to 5 years. So with the University of Berkeley, Village to Village Network, Capital Impact Partners, and villages in California have started to look at the impact. And these impacts will be able to show policymakers and you all and funders that this is a movement that actually is viable. Social engagement, you can start to see that 68% of village members in California, out of the 10 villages that were researched, 68%, so 70% said the quality of life was better, and 35% said that they would be able to stay in their homes longer because they were members of villages. 70% said that they are more likely to stay in their own homes as they age, and 48% agree that they're less worried about money. The next slide starts to show you that they are 53% agree that their quality of life has improved, and that's over 1 year of being a member of a village. 45% agree that they're happier, and 33% agree that they feel healthier. So in moving to the next slide, you can start to see the impact that villages are having on individual village members. The research, public policy, and advocacy that is starting to happen now that we are gaining these kinds of impacts, as you can see, is more and more villages are opening, more villages are developing and exploring. The village network itself is expanding, and the public policy implications are that hopefully in the future, with the other aging and community options that you're looking at now, public policy will start to support funding going to helping people stay in their homes, have choice. And we are running a national conference in D.C., September 29th, 30th, and a Hill Day on October 1st. And people are welcome to join us. It's on our website. And that is the type of education and advocacy that is really starting to take hold. In looking at the next slide, you'll see that I think we would all agree that the community as a whole will strengthen if its older residents stay put and local residents are engaged in a network of support. I can tell you a lot more about the business models that have developed, and we're doing research on which are the most effective, which village model has the most efficacy, and many other things. But for this, I want to just end by saying, with the last slide, that I am available for the questions and answers today, but also feel free to contact me. Our website is actually vtv@vtvnetwork.org. And I'll pass it back to you, John.
Well, thank you so much, Judy, for that wonderful update on the villages. It's grown exponentially just in the past few years, as you say, because it's such a compelling model. And we look forward to learning more about it as we move forward. We want to turn now to a different sort of example, because it's a local example of a program as opposed to a national model. But it's also interesting because it's an intergenerational program. I fortunately had the opportunity to visit it recently in Portland, Oregon. So Derenda, tell us a little bit about the Bridge Meadows intergenerational community and how it developed and what you're trying to accomplish.
Thank you, John, and thank you all for inviting me to be here today. It's a great opportunity to be on this panel with my colleagues, and we were delighted to have you here, John. And I'll do the same methodology that Judy did I'll just say the word next. So next on our slides. So Bridge Meadows is an intentional intergenerational community designed with the social purpose of helping children who have languished in foster care find a forever family. It also is a community that provides support to their families so that their families thrive, and then elders are essential to the community as they find meaning and purpose serving as surrogate grandparents and mentors to the children and the families. The model is based on the premise that it's a natural community that is going to provide the healing as opposed to professional doctors and social workers like myself as a psychologist who move in and out of families' lives. But as you build the social fabric of a family's life, it is more likely that the healing will stick, if you will. We are the third one of these in the nation. We were inspired by the Generations of Hope organization's Hope Meadows in Rantoul, Illinois, which has received significant national press on NBC News and Oprah and the like. And we were very inspired by that and thought that Portland needed a Hope Meadows-like organization here. And then following that was the Treehouse organization, which is in East Hampton, Massachusetts. So we embarked on this endeavor way back in 2004 and came out of the ground in North Portland in an urban setting with much support from our civic leaders and state leaders to make sure that the citizens of Portland also had access to this incredible community. So we welcome people home April 1st, 2011. So let's talk about what happens in our beautiful community. Well, the elders, let's start with the philosophy. The philosophy is that all of the residents in our community, whether you're a child or an adult next or an elder, you are an ordinary person doing great things in the world. And we believe that the power of social connection is what is most healing. The elders have purposeful engagement. As you can see, they're singing karaoke right there. When the elders, the children, the parents are creating those natural social connections, the children are really flourishing, and we're watching their trauma really slip away, and the parents are feeling stronger. And I'll talk about that in a little bit when we talk about outcomes. The community is designed to enhance the connection with the social purpose by how our architect designed the community. There's all kinds of places where people intentionally and formally connect in our beautiful community room, but there's also things like where the mailboxes are placed and how the porches are placed and where how the sidewalks crisscross. So, as I said before, we really believe that the community serves as the intervention. Next. And the philosophy is that, as I said earlier, no matter how old you are an ordinary person who requires the same connection in family and community as that we'd want for ourselves. When we were creating Bridge Meadows, the construction team, the architect team, and the social scientists who sat around the table, we all had the threshold of if if we wanted it for ourselves, our children, or our parents, then it met the threshold. But if it wasn't good enough for that, with our own families, then it didn't meet the threshold, and we would strive to create the element that we wanted. And so this is the philosophy that we would all at one point want to live here, and we've all chosen our houses and our apartments as a team. Next. Our next slide, we'll talk about what the guiding principles are when you create an intergenerational community. The first is that there is a social purpose. We see that as the glue that brings people together, that there are 3 generations because when you have the parents involved, you don't have a missing generation. There are communities around the nation that are grand families, and they're very important, and because sometimes that's just what you have are 2 generations. We've really seen the power of the 3 generations coming together for a couple of reasons, is that the children know who their parents are, and that as the parents are growing older, they have the support of others in the community. And some of our parents here at Bridge Meadows are 55 and older, and they actually would qualify as an elder. And when that happens, when a grandma is adopting her grandchildren, what happens is the children actually lose a grandmother. And so we've learned that with the 3 generations, the children are actually able to gain 29 grandparents. As I said earlier, the physical design really enhances the connections and the relationships and aging in place. But somebody recently told me, I'm not aging in place, Derenda, I'm living in place. So I'm trying to change my vernacular. But the idea is that we used universal design. So whether you were in a stroller or you needed a walker, you could get around easily. Our practice is grounded in the theory and research behind psychology and child psychology, trauma psychology, family psychology, as well as social psychology and gerontology. We learn from experience. That means we are constantly evolving. The elders and the children and the parents teach us every day, and so we evolve. It's a community that looks a little bit different than it did 3 years ago because as people have lived here, we've learned new things and we've adapted our policies and practices as such. The elders are essential community volunteers, and here at Bridge Meadows, the elders are required to serve 100 hours every quarter in community engagement. And that can be whatever speaks to their heart, what brings them joy, what makes them feel vibrant and necessary in the world. So it could be reading to a child, it could be tutoring a child, it could be making a casserole for the frazzled parent, it could be sewing the arm back on the teddy bear, it could be sitting next to a child and listening to one's day, it could be helping a peer go to the grocery store. It's really all about community and connection. It's not about the Bridge Meadows windows need to be cleaned. It's about how are you connected. We believe there must be diversity in the community, and so we have diversity with regard to not only age, which is pretty obvious, but also ethnicity, and people come from all around the nation to live here at Bridge Meadows. We have people from New Mexico, Manhattan, Illinois, Colorado, California, and they've learned about us through their desire to find community and through the websites. And then we also have the principle that staff guide and not govern. I think we would now say that staff facilitate, not govern. We spend a significant amount of time helping the community knit together in our quiet ways and more obvious ways with our, we have some circles, which we call Wisdom Circle for our elders and Parent Circle and Kid Circle. And they're really support groups that help people discuss how it is to transition in this stage of life, wherever they are, and how is it that you help children who've experienced trauma. And what does it mean to age, and what does it mean to parent? So it's a way for people to build connections in a therapeutic way, but we don't call it a therapeutic moment. We call it a circle. And we also, those are the formal ways, and then we also do behind-the-scenes knitting when there might be a conflict. We help people figure that conflict out, or we help build connections. If we know a little one is struggling with math and we have a math wizard and an elder, we'll connect people in the, we call it BridgeMeadowsMatch.com way, and bring people together that way. economic issues are addressed but don't compromise our principles. What that means is that the housing is affordable, and that while people's economic situations might change, we can still help make the housing affordable so that they have a sense of permanency. What happens for the children in the foster care system is, on average, they move at least 3 times. And that's quite disrupting if you're a young person, because you lose your friends, you lose your connections, and most importantly, you lose academic time and experience. And so we have found it possible for these children to stay here with their families who are adopting them. That is an agreement that the families make, is that they will adopt the children and as they live here, and then but they don't have to change their housing as their foster payments reduce to adoption payments. And then the elders, as their income may change, their housing is also secure. And we also believe in cohesion, stopping short of insularity, meaning we could all become this little utopia here on our 2 acres in North Portland and never be a part of the greater community. But that isn't what happens. The buildings were created to encourage engagement with the greater community. There are porches on the front of the family homes. There are walkways that invite the greater neighborhood to be here. And I'm proud to tell you that the Neighborhood Association, which is very strong and vocal here in our neighborhood, meets here on a regular basis. And we partner with others in our community to provide services. And while myself as a psychologist and Renee Mosley, our associate director, as a licensed clinical social worker, can provide those services, we're really running the company. And so it's best that we partner with those in the community who can do those, who can provide that. So moving on, I'm often asked, how did you finance this interesting idea next? And how we did that was through a combination of public and private dollars. And you can see there was $11 million in public dollars, and then we raised $1.3 million private funding. And you should know that happened in the middle of a recession. And some folks called us a little bit crazy, but I also think that when a crisis such as our recession happens, people are also looking for innovative ideas to long-standing problems, and that you can see here is evident by those investments. And now currently, we as we operate, we are utilizing rental income as well as private fundraising and our new business angle, which is consultation. We are being asked from others around the nation and locally to assist them in creating their intergenerational community. And one notable one is here in Portland is the Native American Youth and Family Services is creating one with a culturally specific bent. And we are very honored to be a part of that. Next. So what we have learned about Bridge Meadows as a solution is that there are 30 elders living here currently, and as I said earlier, they provide an average of 400 hours a year in community engagement. We have 9 families living in our 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath homes, and as I said earlier, the families agree to adopt or become the guardian of the children, and that was really to give them a sense of permanency, so that because the children, like I said, have moved around a lot, and by the families agreeing to adopt, they know who their forever family is. And within the Department of Human Services across the nation, there is a push for families and kin to take on the children because there just aren't enough foster parents around the nation and to do this. And so the kin, it's more of a crisis adoption where grandma gets a call on a Tuesday and says, hey, your grandchildren are in peril and need you. Would you take these children on? And oftentimes they're more than willing to do that, but they might not have the resources nor their dwelling be large enough to take on the children. So we are so anyway, they can stay here. Anyway, 88% of the families represent relatives, as I said, and 88% of the families are headed by single females. And currently there are 29 kids living at Bridge Meadows. So let's move on to the next slide. And let's go. I think the best way to tell you, let me do this. Outcomes, and then I'm going to tell you a story, and then we're going to go to questions. So here are the outcomes that we're studying, and we're excited to have Portland State University Institute on Aging as our research partner, and they are a leader in the age-friendly city movement along with New York City's age-friendly city movement. And what we've seen here is that the residents are satisfied with the housing, so we designed it well, and we are watching their health, the children's health, and improve the reduction reduction in their behavioral issues, and elders report living with meaning and purpose leads to their vibrant lives. And we are watching their anxiety reduce significantly, and the parents feel much more resilient. The youth are improving academically, which and some of our children had never even been to school, so they are approving and receiving accolades at the school, which we know that will good academic performance leads to positive outcomes later in life. And as we've said before, most of the children are now on their way, all of the children are on their way to permanency, and 58% of them are now adopted, with the others on their way. And let's move on to a story, which I'll be quick about. Next, please. There's our beautiful community. This family, next, is a cousin who was asked to adopt these 3 children, and she and this gentleman who was living alone, and they now have become a family. And these children who were about to be separated from one another as siblings are now living very healthy, vibrant lives. They're working through their trauma, which would have been very daunting as a single mother. And this gentleman, Dave, has been an important part of their life. And next slide will now show you who. Thank you for the next slide. And this next picture now shows you what their extended family has become. Instead of just the 3 of them, it's all of those people. So I'm happy to answer questions, and the next slide gives our contact information. And outside of this seminar, I'm actually feel free to reach out to us to answer questions, and thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you so much. We have such rich content today that we're only going to have a little bit of time for questions, but let me turn to a couple, and then I will come back to each of you to ask you for your final words. A reminder to our audience, you can get the slides by sending an email to info@asaging.com, asaging.org. I'm sorry, not .com. And you can also find the audio recording with the slides in about a week on the Grantmakers in Aging website. So here's a question, I think, for Judy, and that's the question about is the village movement appropriate for rural settings? Do you have examples of rural villages that have been successful so far?
The answer is yes. 40% of the villages that are open are in urban areas, 40% are suburban, but 20% of the open villages are in rural areas. One of the strongest rural villages is in the Monadnock region in New Hampshire, and that's called Monadnock at Home. Frank Harnden is the president of that. And they cover a large area, many counties. And what they do is they have one village that a lot of people join, and they have lots of volunteers, but then they have neighborhoods or clusters so that they connect the people together who live closest to each other, so that you're not driving 20 miles one way or the other for volunteering, and even for home care companies and things like that. They have multiple different providers to cover the area.
Okay, thank you. Jeanne, a question for you. How is AARP evaluating the work that the Livable communities are doing?
We are in the process, John, of developing an evaluation framework. Part of the requirements for the AgeFriendly network is that they create the action plan, and within the context of the action plan, we identify indicators. So we are working through creating a guidebook that would be used for that. In addition, one of the other tools that we are developing that will be released next year is the AARP Livability Index. And that index will allow communities to actually establish a baseline by getting scores within the context of 8 domains, similar to the 8 domains of AgeFriendly. And all of the data in the Livability Index will be drawn from well-known, well-regarded sources such as the American Community Survey or the Census Bureau, other kinds of the EPA for air quality and things like that. And so we will use that as a way to establish a baseline, and then as work is undertaken, we can see how the results will move. So 2 things, the Livability Index that will be released next April, and then our own evaluation guidelines and framework that will identify potential indicators that communities could use based on their own action plans.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to bring our questions to an end. We have a lot of questions, unfortunately, but I want to refer you back to the information for each of our panelists and ask you to address your questions directly to them. But at this point, I want to return to all of them and ask each of them to give us their final words of wisdom on this important topic as we move forward. So, Jeanne, let's start with you.
Well, John, I think if the last words that I have are the demographics in our country are changing. We're all getting older, and we're all living longer, which is a wonderful thing. And that is not a trend that we see reversing anytime soon. So it's really important that communities begin to think about the approaches that they can take to make sure that their communities can support their residents as they get older and really focus their energies around that effort.
All right. Thanks very much. Judy?
I would just say and highlight what I said before in terms of it's all about choice. And we hopefully, as we have been at any age, have had independence and choice in our lives. And as we grow older, we absolutely want that to continue. So supporting these aging and community initiatives is very important for individuals, for groups of people, for politicians, for your city, state. So please jump in and help on all levels.
Thanks so much. Derenda?
Well, there's definitely a deep interest for people to feel as though they belong to a community and feel as though their life has meaning and purpose. And when they live that way, there's positive gains in health and well-being, reducing the social service costs and the healthcare costs of our nation. So as we build these wonderful communities, whether they're villages or through the efforts of AARP's Livable Communities, we will all continue to live healthier lives.
I want to thank Jeanne Anthony, who is the Senior Project Manager for Education and Outreach at AARP Livable Communities, Judy Willett, who is the National Director for the Village to Village Network, and Derenda Schubert, who is the Executive Director of Bridge Meadows Intergenerational Community, for their participation in today's program. We thank them for all that they do to make life better for older adults. I also want to thank the John A. Hartford Foundation, the New York Academy of Medicine, the Community Agenda Initiative, and the Pfizer Foundation for their support of this program, as well as the American Society on Aging for their technical expertise.